Hope you guys appreciate this because, golly, I made a disaster out of this place on this one. Hey Woodworkers YouTube, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Mark and I'm from Woodworker Source. And from time to time, I make videos like this to help remove the mystery behind hardwoods and things related to that. And today, I think I've got a pretty good one that you're gonna like. So when you hear the word mahogany in terms of a wood, you might be thinking of something that's kind of elegant. Something with gorgeous grain, subtle bronze reddish color, and nuanced grain patterns, and maybe a light figure to it. Beautiful, but not garish, just classy. But the problem is you get a lot of woods out there that get the word mahogany attached to its name in some way or another. Like Honduras mahogany, Cuban mahogany, African mahogany, Philippine mahogany, genuine mahogany, Kaya mahogany, Sapele mahogany, Brazilian mahogany, Central American mahogany, big leaf mahogany. Then you have about another dozen woods out there that go by mahogany substitute, as if those 9 or 10 that I just rattled off there weren't enough. We'll confuse you even further with some substitutes. So let's try to answer this today. What makes mahogany mahogany? What are the differences between all those woods? And how does any of this help you do better woodworking? I think you're gonna like this. I've picked out these 4 woods as the ones that you're probably going to run into the most often as mahogany. Genuine mahogany, African mahogany, Sapele, and then this stuff called Santos Mahogany. These 3 are actually botanically related. This one is more like an outlier. This classifies as a substitute mahogany. So we're gonna step through each of these, covering the characteristics of each one, and plus we'll also finish a panel of each wood just to show you how they really look. Regretfully, we've got to start with a little bit of botany and a little bit of history. But I'm going to move as quickly as possible so that the boredom doesn't catch up to us, okay? Way back in 3rd or 4th grade, you learned about botanical classification. Okay, just because they were teaching it doesn't mean you were learning it. Well, mahogany has its own family within that scheme called Meliaceae. There are over 600 species in that family, so if you weren't confused enough by the 9 or 10 I just rattled off a minute ago, the party is just getting started. But there are only just a few of them in that family that, 1, grow large enough to produce lumber, and 2, yield the quality of lumber that woodworkers even care about. So within the mahogany family, there are 3 genera with about 15 species of wood that get named mahogany one way or the other. They're all effectively really exquisite woods that share similarities. Now for a little bit of history, starting with a wood called Cuban mahogany. I actually don't have a board to show you. That's because this wood is no longer harvested for lumber. So why do I even mention it? But you go back to the 1500s all the way through the early 20th century and it was the standard mahogany. It's just no longer available anymore. From the mid 20th century up till now, the standard species is Swietenia macrophylla, a wood that you probably know as Honduras mahogany or what they call genuine mahogany. This species grows all over Latin America, from Brazil all the way up to Mexico. But you know the one place it doesn't come from anymore? Honduras. I just told you it was in the name, right? That's because once upon a time, Honduras was the primary supplier for the wood, but they're no longer producing it, so you can't get it out of Honduras anymore. Some suppliers will still call it Honduras mahogany. That's probably because it's just simpler to keep the name without boring your customers to death with minutia. Don't get bored. Okay, back on track. We go with the name genuine mahogany around here. At the end of the day, this wood is such a joy to work with because it's surprisingly easy to cut, shape, sand, and finish. Plus you get that hallmark combo of great color and exquisite figure. The downside is when it's freshly planed or cut, and that's because the color comes out alarmingly pale. But it just needs a couple days of UV exposure to get the color to roast up really nicely to where you want it. And so what's African mahogany? Botanically speaking, it's in the mahogany family, also known as Kaya mahogany, with several species that can be lumped together and sold as African mahogany. It's really difficult to tell the difference between genuine mahogany and African mahogany by just looking at them. They're not necessarily identical, it's just that they're really hard to tell apart until you've worked with both of them a couple of times and gotten to know them. Because this wood is a lot more interlocking grain, it's a lot harder to read for the best angle of attack when you are joining, planing, carving, or routing it. With African mahogany, you're gonna get a little bit more tear out, a little bit more fuzzy grain. It's nothing that can't be fixed with a little bit of sanding, it's just that it's not as desirable to work with as genuine mahogany is. It's also usually cheaper than genuine mahogany, so you got that trade-off. And just like genuine mahogany, African will be a little bit disappointingly pale when it's freshly planed or freshly cut. It just needs a little bit of time to roast up to that nice color. So I think this third beauty really stands on its own as a legit furniture wood, and it really doesn't need to cling to its association with mahogany. But sometimes you'll see this called Sapele or Sapele Mahogany. Sapele is a little easier to identify from African or genuine mahogany, but it's a little harder to describe. As it ages, the color darkens quite a bit, and it's really more crimson or more maroon than it is gold or bronze like African or genuine mahogany. And if in doubt, give it a sniff. It's got a very distinctive spicy or peppery scent to it. Sapele does suffer from the same issue when it's freshly planed or cut, and that the color comes out disappointingly pale right away. But all it needs is just a little bit of time, a little bit of UV exposure, and in a week or two, you'll see the color start to come in. And even though it's harder and denser than these two, it's surprisingly great to work with. It machines nicely, and it's not too bad with hand tools, but when it's quarter sawn, and especially if you got a lot of really vivid ribbon stripe, that kind of grain likes to tear if you're not mindful at planing it at an angle. But you can easily clean it up with a card scraper. We carry it in quarter sawn material, and that means it has a lot of that ribbon figure flowing through it. Sapele really stands on its own as a great wood, and we like to recommend it for a number of reasons. And especially if you are just starting to dabble with exotic woods and you want to try something a little bit different, we really recommend you try out that one sometime. So like I said, Santos Mahogany is a wood that's not actually in the mahogany family. It just shares some characteristics with these other woods. And it might serve as a substitute if this appeals to you more. But yeah, it has that romantic sounding name, Santos Mahogany. It's got that nice reddish color, beautiful grain. It kind of fits in with mahogany in those regards. If this looks good to you, then it's a win. And good, bad, or otherwise, Santos Mahogany is a lot heavier, a lot harder than these three. So it's a good choice for furniture that's gonna take a beating, or for something like a cutting board where you want it to be tough and colorful. How and why you choose one mahogany over the other really depends on what's important to you. Your budget, how nice the wood is to work, how authentic it is to the mahogany name, and of course, what type of project you're working on. That out of the way, we gotta talk about finishing. So I mentioned how all of these woods suffer that same fate that when they're freshly planed or they're freshly cut, that they're disappointingly pale. There's a couple ways around that. The first one is to just let your boards sit for a while and let them roast up naturally, so to speak. Or when it comes to finishing, hit them with a light coat of oil first. You let that dry, and then you come back and you top coat your project with whatever you each want to do. It's basically a two-step process. So let's do that to each one of these. I'll show you how that goes, and off we go. There you go, guys. I hope that answered a bunch of your questions. Genuine mahogany remains the creme de la creme across the board, but the others might work depending on your budget, your taste, and your needs. As much as I try to keep these quick and to the point, we kind of got in the weeds on this one a little bit. So, you win some, you lose some. Once again, my name is Mark. I'm from Woodworker Source. We are your friendly hardwood lumber supplier. So you can come visit us at any one of our 3 stores in Arizona or online at woodworkersource.com, where we make it really easy to buy lumber online and have it shipped right to your door. If there's anything I missed, if you've still got questions about something, just post the comments below and we'll answer. Thanks.